Hey guys, welcome to the Show Up Dad. This is a podcast for hardworking fathers looking to level up their fathering skills and be more than just a paycheck or provider for the home. Today's guest is none other than Stephan B. Poulter. He is a licensed clinical therapist and he is from Los Angeles, California. Okay, he is the author of The Father Factor, The Mother Factor, Your X Factor, and 2 other amazing books. He has practiced as a clinical psychologist specializing in family relationships for more than 25 years. Dr. Stephan uses his decades of experience to bring understanding and insight to the problem of shame. That brings us to our topic today, which is healthy masculinity. Welcome to the Show Up Dad, brother.
Oh, man, David, what a gracious introduction. Thank you. It's great to be with you. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Once again, I know you've been a past guest on here, Steve. Wow. And
love it.
Love it. Yeah, exactly. And I just kind of wanted to just go through this real quick. Can you give us a history of where this idea of toxic masculinity that everybody's talking about came from and why?
Dave, it's a great question. In my late 20s, early 30s, I was a police officer. Mm-hmm. And I could never understand the rage I saw where men would shoot each other or these fights, these things would break out. I never understood the psychology of it. And I was interested, I went to seminary, and then I really got interested in the psychology of how to reach people in a way to help them deal with this malaise inside of them. Mm-hmm. And I remember what got me interested in writing the books on fathers, boys who feel neglected will act out. Girls who feel neglected by their father will act in, turn it inward. Boys that act out, I've never met a son who acts out who has a father who is an asset. When I say act out, I mean really problematic, disciplinary, serious issues. And that kind of just drove me to look into it more and more. And then the Columbine shooting 22 years ago in 1999. And those 2 boys were, they had a secret life their parents didn't know about. And that always triggered me, David. I'm thinking, how can we help our sons empower them to move forward on the road of life? Because our job as dads is to empower our sons and daughters to fulfill their life mission. Not our life mission for them, but their life mission. And that's what got me into shame. Because I see shame as that invisible glass wall that people hit. It's not anxiety. It's not depression. It's this inner feeling that I'm bad. And there's not enough achievement, enough money, accolades, or success that can whitewash that. It's in you. So that's what got me, David, to really look at in the last 30 years. Mm-hmm. And over, 60,000 hours of working with clients and over the years, really, shame to me just jumps out. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of an overview, Dave. That's kind of got me to look at it.
Okay. No, that's interesting how you went as a police officer to seminary school and just wanted to really reach people. That's awesome. Okay. Now the reason why I'm asking this is because
throw it out, Dave. Yeah.
Man, everybody keeps saying toxic masculinity. What does that mean?
Nothing.
Right?
Okay, that's okay. Let's start there. It's an overused word, like dysfunctional communicate. My family's dysfunctional. What does that mean? It means you guys don't talk. Toxic masculinity doesn't mean because you're angry or you rage or scream. That doesn't mean you're toxic. Toxic is when it destroys you, the holder, and the people around you. So now there's a lot of people that may not, they're scared because the guy doesn't know how to express his emotions. Because I call it the male gag order, which precedes the toxic male order. The gag order is you can't talk unless you're happy or you're grieving. You can't express any other emotions as a man. Everything else is kind of off limits. That's how I see what they're calling toxic is like a guy's in a straitjacket. He doesn't know how to talk, or it's like he doesn't know the foreign language of his emotions. And that's part of what I do with writing the books, David, working with you, is to help people help guys get a handle on what's going on inside of them. Toxic is overused, okay? Because nobody knows what it means. What it really means psychologically is a person is very dangerous to himself and others, not only emotionally but physically too. It's a whole different bird.
Huh. Yeah, that's interesting because, man, it's such a word that is just widely used right now. Absolutely.
Yeah. I know there's a lot of groups that kind of maybe swinging to another side of the spectrum where men are bad. Men aren't bad. Men are misunderstood, and when you're misunderstood, it doesn't look good. And that's why people like you, David, you're really blessing that you're out there helping us get a voice, helping dads have a voice. You know how to stand up and get involved in their families. And like you said, more than a paycheck, that model is outdated because in the old show, Ozzie and Harriet needed Ozzie's involvement, not him just going to work every day. Boys do better when their dads are involved. And you post statistics on this all the time, David, and I love it. It has nothing to do with race or creed or location. Involved dads, their children benefit. There's benefit. And that takes what toxic means, I really find, is self-destructive. There are toxic women that are self-destructive. Toxic femininity. It's a loaded term, Dave.
Absolutely. So from my understanding from that, Steve, is that it's misunderstood, right? It's overused. And also it's because we don't know how to communicate, right?
Right. That's the root of it. Yeah, that's the denominator, Dave. And you're helping these guys with the stuff you post all the time on how to talk through a conflict, how to discipline, how to set limits, set boundaries, how to talk to your wife or the baby mama, how to talk to your girlfriend, the people in your life. When guys can't communicate, then it starts boiling. And that's why they say it's toxic. It's more they don't know how to really communicate their true feelings.
Yeah, and that's crazy because I was talking about this the other day, and we're discussing how as boys we're always taught to mask our feelings. So basically, we're trained since childhood. You know what I mean? Like when you fall down, don't cry.
Yeah. Yeah, come on, don't cry. Yeah, but part of I talk with the men's barbershop group, and what we talk about all the time, Dave, what you just said is, guys, we're all connected emotionally, and when we start talking about how we feel, it doesn't feminize masculinity. In fact, it makes it stronger because it takes courage to forgive. It takes courage to feel. Denial isn't a friend. Stuffing it, Dave, isn't going to win, isn't going to help anybody. When I see guys road rage, or they say they have anger management problems, I go, no, you don't. That's just where it comes out. It's when you're driving. Because that's boiling deep down inside of you. And that's where you choose to let it out.
And it's crazy because it's sad. I mean, I'll just give you one example here in New Mexico. We had this road rage incident a few years ago where a guy cut off another man on the road. Okay, young guy. They're on the freeway. And the father, because of his ego or for whatever, couldn't control himself because this young, lack of a better word, punk, cut him off and didn't want to let him in. He started, with this, shaking of the fist and throwing gestures at each other and everything. Well, what happened, Steve, is that this young guy pulled out a gun and opened fire on the freeway into this vehicle. Now, the father didn't want to let it go. Unbeknownst to him, his daughter, if I'm correct on this, his baby was shot. She died in his arms on the freeway.
Oh.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Horrible.
David, I get guys that want to fight, and I look and I go, come on. In 20 minutes, you're going to regret it. Come on. Don't do that.
Yeah, it's amazing how that one incident where we don't control ourselves, where we let our emotions get the best of us, can turn into something that's a repercussion for a lifetime. The ripple effect.
David, it's a ripple effect. And when I was a police officer, I remember seeing my first day on the job, literally 15 minutes in, it was like out of a movie. Domestic violence is 3:30 in the afternoon. We worked swing shift. A girlfriend shot her boyfriend through the eye. I had never seen an exit wound or brain matter for that point. And he had hit her. He'd had a history of beating her up. And that day, she had enough.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I say to men. If you're raging like that guy on the freeway, his daughter got killed, God, there's no amount of sorrow that can cover that. That's preventable.
Yes.
And as dads, David, we got to grab those guys and go, hey, dude, come on. Well, who told you you're not enough? Okay?
Mm.
I've never met a guy who's violent who doesn't feel that he's inadequate. If he felt adequate, he wouldn't be so violent.
Wow.
If he felt like he's enough, David, he's not going to the nth degree with a gun or a crowbar or a vehicle.
No.
Who told you weren't enough? And they look at me like, think about it. Who told you that? Because you're acting. You want someone's approval. Every son and daughter wants their dad's approval. And, Dave, that's why all the work you do is so invaluable. Guys forget that.
And it's so true because it's totally linked back to that approval that we seek in our father.
Yep, with dad. Yeah.
Man.
David, I remember Mandalay Bay 4 years ago, the guy that, got a machine gun and, 80 people he shot and himself. When he was 12, his dad got arrested by the FBI for bank robberies and never saw his dad again. Never saw his dad again.
Wow.
It's in my book. And that, when I read that, I heard that, I thought, oh, that makes sense. He was so angry at society for losing his dad.
And it's amazing because that story right there, which I'm sure there's many, holds true. One of the quotes that I always say is, what walks in fathers runs in sons.
That's right on, David. And that guy on the freeway who wouldn't let that kid who thought he was a punk, I'd say that father, who beat you up emotionally? Who did it? Who did it? That's why you're acting out, because you're reliving it. You're reliving it. And when you heal that, David, first of all, nothing's beyond the hand of the universe to heal you or the grace of God to heal you. Nothing is beyond. Anybody who says that, they don't think they can be healed. And of course you can. It takes a lot of work, but you can do it. But that rage, David, that toxic rage, is an unresolved son inside, regardless of age or size.
So is that how shame is linked to this term toxic masculinity?
Yes, absolutely, David. Yeah. Where shame comes in is that you feel like you're defective. And that goes back to about age 5, Dave. Guys decide the way they're raised and spoken to, they're either inferior or they're competent. They're either capable or inferior. And then they kind of go through the next 5 to 10, 15 years. And then in their early 20s, they kind of revisit that on what they're going to do for a job or schooling and like amend it, correct it. And shame a lot of times tells you you're defective. And guys are trying to offset that their whole life. And that's where fighting and all that stuff comes in. Abandoning your children, all this stuff.
So let me ask you this. So shame is a symptom of being defective, correct? Or that
right.
thought of feeling.
You're defective. Yeah, feeling defective. Shame is out. Dave, shame, probably the best way is that there's this gold brick inside of you. And shame is the mud covering it up. And our job as dads is to wash off the gold brick inside of us so we can help our sons and daughters to wipe off the mud covering their brick.
Man.
So their true soul can come out. the goodness, their empowerment, their best self. I always say to my clients, come on, who's your best self? Let's see him. I want to see your best self. Not your lower self, your best self. Come on. He's in there. I know he's there.
Man, and it's so interesting because I'd never heard of it like that. Shame, actually being a symptom, right, of being inferior or your thought of it, right? And then also the root cause linking back to what you were told as a child. And you said age 5, correct?
Age 5. This goes back to Dr. Spock, the guru, post-World War II. I mean, his book, the best-selling book, Baby and Child Care. And Dr. Spock always said, how kids are spoken to is more important than what goes on at home. How you're spoken to is what you carry. David, because kids, I'm reading this right out of the book, the child's internal voice, when they're criticized, they start to talk to themselves like, I'm bad, no one loves me, I'm a failure. And David, that goes into the cement of their soul. And it's very, very difficult unless they really rework it to heal that.
Mm-hmm. Now, how would one go about removing that? I mean, because obviously it's like an onion, correct? You continue to build these layers, right? And you got to peel it back.
One thing shame can't tolerate is exposure.
Okay.
When you really get it down, David, to the fact that I don't feel like I'm enough, I mean, that takes a lot of courage to admit that.
Mm-hmm.
And that in itself, when you admit, okay, I don't have to be perfect. I don't have to be enough. And that's what I talk about in the book, the power of self-acceptance. Not self-perfection, self-acceptance. Because remember, David, shame feeds on 3 things: avoidance, denial, and anger. Avoidance, that didn't happen when I was a child. Denial, what I wasn't beaten. And anger keeps everybody away from you. No one gets close.
Man, that's true, because you can kind of see it in people who are suffering from this, because they get this. I know for me, I used to do social avoidance. You know what I mean? I don't like being around crowds. You know what I mean? Whether that be from my childhood or from the military or whatever. You know what I mean? I just kind of prefer being kind of left alone. Yeah.
Now, some of that is healthy, David. I'm talking about, where we don't let our wife or our partner get close to us. That's where it's problematic. Because the antidote to those 3 is acceptance, empathy, and understanding. Because answering your question about how do we deal with our shame, because shame thrives on being avoided, denial, what shame, and anger keeps it covered up. When I meet an angry guy, I'm just, oh my God, he was never hugged as a child. That's the truth. I'm like, oh my God. I saw these guys last Saturday night, hot rodding their cars where we live down here, Southern California. And my wife goes, they weren't hugged as children. I'm like, oh my God, that is so true. They are, trying these big, these muscle cars and making all, I'm like, oh my God. Like, yeah, they weren't. They really weren't.
And it's funny. It's funny because my boy, when he's throwing a fit, he's a redhead, so
oh yeah,
he rages on a whole different level. And sometimes I got to look at him and just be like, man, Luke, you need a hug.
Exactly. God, Dave, that is so good. Because David, when a boy or a daughter feels accepted, empathy is I understand I understand you. I'm not correcting you. I understand you. Empathy is, okay, I'm sorry, Luke, you're upset. You can't eat chocolate chip cookies right now. Something didn't go right. That empathy and understanding, David, shame can't grow. Cannot grow. It's not going to take place.
So it's basically rooted in just keeping it secret, just not talking about secret. It. Yep.
Yeah, Dave. Yeah, the big secret. I always tell people and there's a saying in psychology that you're as sick as your biggest secret.
You know what? I wonder if that's actually a take from the Bible, because there's an actual scripture that says that the power of sin is in its secrecy. Yep,
it's all biblically based, because wisdom is the Bible is timeless in its wisdom. People, I don't believe in the Bible. You don't need to. Truth is truth.
I like that.
Truth is truth.
Steve, I wanted to kind of ask you, now that we talked about
go ahead.
shame and stuff like that and the root cause of it and everything, do you feel masculinity is being feminized, and why?
That's a great question, because you answered it for me. I feel like it's being misunderstood.
Okay.
Because a good man is in touch with both sides of himself, masculinity and the feminine side of himself.
Mm-hmm.
And the feminine side is the ability to have empathy, understand, the softer side. I always call it the velvet-covered brick.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a balanced guy. And I think a lot of guys don't really know how to talk about this, so that's why it feels like it's feminized. It's not feminized. Talking about feelings and whatnot, people say, well, that's all a bunch of mumbo jumbo. I'm like, no, your body doesn't think so when you have cancer or you have a stroke. And this energy is going to go somewhere. Or you got in a fight and you accidentally killed somebody because you pushed them and they hit their head on a car. It's happened in my practice.
Wow.
Guy lost his cool. At a dinner, pushed him. The guy hit his head, and didn't go well.
Wow, and now he's just living those repercussions of that incident.
Yeah, terrible outcome.
And that's one of the things I like to stress. It's just, man, there's always a cause and effect for everything, whether that yelling at a child, like you talked about earlier, or even this incident where on the road where the guy had road rage, he lost his daughter over it. You know what I mean? There's always a cause and effect for everything.
There's a consequence, right?
Exactly.
There's a consequence.
Yes.
And like part of that masculinity is the ability to embrace self-acceptance, to embrace empathy, to feel for other people, and understand yourself and others. That takes courage. That takes courage. Nothing there. There's nothing. If you do those three, you're not missing much.
So is that how you would explain like how healthy masculinity can be manly?
Yes.
Is okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Empathy and
because healthy masculinity takes responsibility for his actions. That's very powerful. When you do that, you don't miss much.
And that's one of the core values here, believe it or not, Steve, at the Show Up Dad, is being responsible, being committed, and being intentional. And you hit the nail right on the head when you talked about being responsible. It's being able to own up to your feelings, your actions, all these things that tie into there. So that's awesome that you said that.
Yeah, David, that is so powerful. Hey, tell me, you had some other questions you want to ask me?
Yeah, absolutely.
The shame factor is it's an issue if you avoid it, and if you confront it, it can't survive. There's an old saying: a cave can be dark for 1,000 years. The minute the light goes in, it's as if it was never dark. And it's the same process with shame. Whatever it says in the Bible, whatever in the shadows will be shouted out on the rooftops. And part of that is our secrets thinking we're bad. You're not bad. You're really not.
No, that's so much truth and wisdom there, Steve. I wanted to read you some of these questions that we have that the audience actually gave us, and one of them is, how can we teach our children, boys and girls, how to be accepting and modeling of healthy masculinity?
Okay, I think being a good person, being a good, following the golden rule, that in itself helps masculinity and femininity to develop properly. Because each person's kind of got their own personality, but following the golden rule, taking responsibility, being accepting of others, that breeds compassion for others, and that is masculinity at its best.
I'd even like to take that a step further and say, man, as fathers, they need to see that in us too, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. People say, I'm having marital problems. Like, well, start liking your wife.
Simple, right?
Yeah. Okay, well, there you have it. Start liking her. And it's amazing how well that goes.
Exactly. And at the end of the day, it's a choice, right? It's something we need to do.
You bet it is. Right on, David. Exactly right. Healthy masculinity is the ability to accept, love, and care about others. Not to force your will, not to control, not to manipulate. That's all the negative side. That's human behavior. Because the behaviors manifest in each gender. So I'm talking about, how people that try to control, they may call that toxic masculinity, but it's really the person feels inadequate and they're trying to control everything. And that's not good. It's terrible.
Yeah, and you see that in a lot of fathers too, where they're fear for whatever, fear of losing a child, fear of losing control, right? We all know that control is wrong. You know what I mean? It's not attainable. The only thing you can control is yourself. You can't control anybody else. That's a dictator.
Yeah, and part of that is being accepting and empowering for your son and daughter. I got some clients where they go through a terrible divorce and child custody. It kind of comes down to one parent's trying to will their will over the other parent and kids, and that's why it doesn't work. Trying to control the other, really problematic.
Yeah, absolutely. Because then that's just, it just goes back to just being that dictator that we talked about.
Yeah.
And I think that's a root of fear, honestly. I think, personally.
Absolutely. It really is, David. Yeah, fear, that the fear factor is, if I don't control it, something bad's going to happen. That goes back to your childhood. And many times people come from a chaotic family, like, oh my God, what's going to happen? Well, it's okay. Your son, your daughter, they're all right. And they pick up on it. They know.
Man, I wanted to share with you real quick one thing I just thought of back when I was a child. I was a really good wrestler and stuff like that. And I remember my father, he got kind of upset with me because I was wearing a shirt that was, long. It wasn't tucked in. It wasn't your typical, it was my favorite shirt, though. Yeah. Anyhow, long story short, he wound up tearing it. He's like, tuck it in, it's too long, looks like a dress, tuck it in, you know what I mean? Long story short, he tore my shirt. It was the city championships, and I was going to be wrestling a guy who was really good as well. And long story short, I'm whooping on this guy. I'm up. There's no way I can lose. And for that moment, I was looking at my dad, and I let the guy pin me. Just let him pin me. And I was like way up in points. And at that moment, I felt control because I didn't feel control in my own life.
Wow.
Yeah. Crazy, huh?
Wow. Dave, that's powerful. A lot of kids, boys who act out, it's attention getting.
Yes.
It's attention getting behavior. And that's what's going on.
Yeah, I think, hindsight's 20/20, but you're just looking back at it and just seeing, thinking about that situation. It was like I said, it is my way to say, okay, I can, I can't control anything else, but I can control this, and it was an act of a defilement. Exactly.
Yeah. David, I see a lot of girls do that with food. Yeah, you can't control my eating. I'm like, whoa, here we go.
Man, that probably leads into all kinds of problems.
Oh, Houston, we got a problem. Yep.
Wow.
Yep. Eating disorders and daughters, very, very common. It's not always moms that help create that. Dads do too. I got a dad who said something to his 15-year-old daughter about her weight. I'm just like, oh my God, you're going to get killed. She was so irate with him. It's his issue, not hers.
Gosh, man, that's...
I know.
That gives
powerful.
me goosebumps, bro, because, I mean, gosh, that could happen.
Yeah.
That could happen to any of us. I mean, a lot of our listeners have
Mm-hmm.
daughters or sons, you know what I mean,
Yeah.
whatever. And it's something so simple as that
Mm-hmm.
can cause them to have these
Right.
lifelong issues that, man, you don't want to deal with, you know?
Yeah, you don't want to create that.
No. So I wanted to go ahead, Steve, and run you by another question that came in, and
Got it.
let me see if I can do it justice here, okay? So bear with me. It says,
No problem.
can you talk about the genetic hardwiring of men? Throughout the history of our world, we have been at some sort of war over 90% of history. Okay, with that being said, what is that's in men that we are heavily dependent on those that fought those wars, and at some points it was for pure survival? And the second part of that is, do you think that the comforts of this world and our modern society in the U.S. play a role in current trends such as obstacle course races, CrossFit games, and masculine podcasts?
Interesting. Yeah, I think for as long as men have been here, they've been judged by their ability to be a hunter and gatherer.
Mm-hmm.
And so those sports now, a lot of times are about hunting and gathering, winning, losing. That's why I think sports are so powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's just part of our wiring in the school of life here. And that's why so many men have to learn about being, not achieving.
Mm-hmm.
And where a lot of women learn from their dads, it's about you don't have to do everything versus you can be. Doing versus being for women, and for men, achieving versus being. And that's what, in human history, and people who really evolve, that's what goes on.
Mm-hmm. Huh. So that level of achievement there is what drive it. So is it kind of like a drive for men? Is that
Yeah,
that's what
it's
it
a drive.
is?
And also the testosterone, all that goes with it too. And as men get older, that's where they become like the Black Knight. They can help the young men to how to manage those impulses, how to manage that rage.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what it's about. That's where mentors come in. Fathers help these young boys to kind of navigate this. Like the dad with the gun taking that guy on, or the dad, with his dog. I'd say, come on, you know better.
Mm-hmm.
What are you doing? He's a punk. So what? You were too at one time.
Right. It's interesting because, man, when you were talking about that, I started to remember a conversation I had with a friend of mine, and it was when I was in the military and stuff, and he was older. Obviously, I was only 18, and these guys were 24, 25 years old, so I was very impressionable as a kid. I consider myself a child. Okay. Now, with that being said, one of the things he said is you got to challenge yourself. He's all, it's okay to get in a fight here and there because you got to see you still got it. You know what I mean? And with him telling me that, I want to ask you this question, okay? Do you think that men aren't challenged enough, so they seek voluntary suffering and someone to relate to?
Say that again, David?
In your opinion, do you think that men aren't challenged enough, so they seek this voluntary suffering, right? These challenges that could be unhealthy, and someone to relate to them, as far as like a group or something like that?
Yeah, I think there is, like the Marines. The few, the proud, and the brave. You belong to a group that's designed, and I think like gangs. I mean, gangs. One thing gangs have in common are fatherless boys. There's no dads around. The masculinity is based on killing somebody or beating somebody up or being a bully. Not good.
So yeah, because a lot of it's based on fear, and they think I think a lot of times these young kids, because they're impressionable, obviously, like how I was, they think that they misconstrue fear for respect.
Yeah, absolutely. See, in respect, when someone says the guy didn't respect me, I'm like, no. You don't need his respect. You're looking for it in the wrong places. You feel good about yourself. Okay, the guy was rude. It doesn't mean you need to get in a fight with him.
Right.
Yeah, but he was mad. He was mad dogging me. I'm like, okay, you need to slow down. I'm like, come on, you're looking for trouble.
But it could escalate though. I mean, that's.
Yeah, it can. And you walk away. You just don't get into it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's hard. Like, I mean, some guys, making fun of you, and this whole thing about masculinity again. If you walk away from a fight, you're a coward. No, you're not. You're in control, and that is mastery. Controlling yourself is, you can rule a country, but you can't. If you can't control yourself, you have no control. And that's part of growing and learning. And it goes for women and men.
Mm-hmm. And I think you talked about mentors earlier. You know what I mean? I think that ties back into that mastery you just talked about, because that's what a mentor is. It's someone who has walked through it, been through it, right?
Yeah. Do like you're doing for all these fathers, you're pointing them down the road. Mm-hmm. They got to walk the road, but you're helping them. It's great.
Now, Steve, what advice do you offer parents when faced with challenging questions from their children? And then he asks, as a parent, I can't easily say what I mean and find myself filtering my genuine, true, and deeply rooted answer out of fear my sons may misinterpret and risk a dangerous reciting of my answer.
I tell the parents to relax, okay? Depends what the question is. Are we talking about, I tell parents, it's okay, well, the age of your child, what's the question? And sometimes, you can, if you don't want to talk about it at that moment, go, I want to answer your question, but I want to think about my answer before I give it to you. I tell parents, go buy some time. Mm-hmm. Because you're asking a question doesn't mean you immediately need to respond. That's a mistake a lot of people make.
Wow.
It's like they're on, And I'm saying, no, let me think about that. Let me get back to you. Not put them off and get back to them. That way they can trust your words. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I said guys all the time. Well, my kid asked me this while we're driving. Okay, honey, let's talk about this when we get home, when I'm not distracted. Or outside, or at a restaurant or outside. Let's talk about this later. Yeah, absolutely.
Man, and it's amazing because it's so simple, because we know this as men, especially, like a lot of our listeners are blue-collar workers, a lot of linemen and stuff like that, and that's one of the things that we always talk about as far as even with apprentices. It's like, if I don't know the question that you're asking me, I will find out for you. Well, let's use that even for our children.
For our kids. Absolutely. Yeah, my kids ask me some questions. Let me think about that. And that's priceless. Because that shows me you're thinking about it. So that answers that earlier question. Well, my kids will misquote me. If you think it through, it's not really going to happen. It really doesn't. It depends what they're asking too. The age, but generally speaking, kids don't misquote their parents.
Okay.
They just don't.
That's some great advice there. What else can you offer to parents that deal with children taking on roles, hobbies, and interests more consistent with the opposite sex, to the extent it generates some sort of social backlash?
So how we treat our wives, our daughters, our mother, our sisters goes a long way on how our sons will treat the opposite sex. And how our daughters will allow themselves to be treated. So there's a lot to that, what you and I model, and you talked about it a lot, David, on your website, about what we model to our sons, how we treat our wives. I mean, I heard that in church forever, and it could not be any more accurate. How we speak to her in a tense moment, or stuff we do, that helps our sons to have boundaries with women, not to be a predator, all that stuff. Because they learn that from us, watching us day in and day out. Or some dads will say, well, I'm divorced. It doesn't matter. They still know.
And that's being that mentor that we talked about, just mentoring our children literally through our actions, not just our words, correct?
Yep. Yep. Exactly.
Let me go ahead and move on to this next question, Steve. It's
Good.
let me see if I can recite this correctly. Okay, it says, thinking of fiscal responsibility and the modern push for the independent woman, what advice do you offer couples who operate their homes as two separate budgets, his and hers, right? And the leverage that this creates when the income is lopsided. So basically saying, the mostly to the higher earner who will inevitably point this out by making their partner feel less than.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Okay. We're now in couples therapy, David.
Yeah.
Okay. We have just gone through the door of, I deal with this out here in Los Angeles more than I ever cared to. There's women that have that kind of money, and there's men that have it. First, I don't see a dual budget working in a household.
Okay.
I guess it doesn't work. You either are in it together or you're not. And this is my opinion. Now, there are people that argue this, but financially speaking, when you grow together, you guys have a common, you come out of the same pool. Mm-hmm. And I find couples that tend to keep their money separate generally keep their emotions separate and their lives separate.
Yes.
It doesn't bode well for the longevity of the relationship. And a woman who wants to be independent, I would say, who's suppressing you? I hear that more as a reaction. If she's feeling empowered, she already is independent. How does she feel controlled? That's how I heard that question. Mm-hmm. If I'm empowering my wife to go out there in the world and I support her, standing with her, behind her, supporting her, that is what they're asking for. Mm-hmm. Genuinely. So if that question came in with a couple, I'd look at the husband, the wife, and just say, okay, so where do you feel trapped? Where do you feel suffocated? And they look at me like they just saw a ghost.
Right.
Because it's not about being independent. It's about, that's a reaction to feeling trapped. Uh-huh. Where do you feel suffocated? Where do you feel like you're shut down? Now we're in it.
Uh-huh. And how would shame filter into that?
Shame is that I'm not good enough.
Okay.
That I'm not good enough. I don't deserve it. It's brutal. Shame's brutal on that account.
Oh, absolutely. Because,
yeah. The husband, can we just do this? I see this a lot. He makes a lot of money, mm-hmm. and he has his wife on an allowance. I'm like, what are you doing? Why don't you guys have an agreement on a budget for the family? Mm-hmm. It doesn't feel good. And I deal with a lot of two income, both parents are working and making money, and they work together on it. There's an ebb and flow. That's what you want to get. Because that shame is I need to control you. Because ultimately, I'm not good enough, so I need to control you so I feel good. Yeah, exactly. Shaming couples, boy, that really, that question isn't about a woman being independent or a man. It's about them feeling trapped. And shame does that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Man, it's so crazy.
I had that yesterday. I just had that in my practice yesterday. Verbatim what you just read to me. And the one partner's ready to divorce the other one. I'm like, no. Back up. Divorce is not the answer. Because you're going to replicate this with your next partner. Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing that you say that because, one of the things we do here is we're, me and my mm-hmm. wife, where we do, we're not counselors, but we are Marriage on the Rocks leaders for our church out here. And it's amazing because that's something that men and women fight with tremendously. Tremendously.
Can I tell you? Yeah. David, I'm telling you right now, I tell guys, fund her project. You want a long life? Fund it. And they're like, what? I'm telling you, when a woman feels like her husband funds her financially, emotionally, physically, spiritually, I'm looking like you are winning the lottery. Mm-hmm. Because a wife will bend over backwards when she knows her husband's doing the same, and he'll get it back tenfold. Mm-hmm. And there's not a woman listening right now who's not shaking her head, saying, "Yeah, that's true."
Right. And then ultimately, you're
now I'm getting on it. Forgive me.
No. It's awesome that you're speaking on this, because the way I tie this back into the family dynamics of the father is, man, if you create that healthy atmosphere for your children, and they see that you guys, because I mean, obviously we talked about how we're mimicking all the time, and our children are learning from us, right? They watch everything.
Yeah.
So when they're seeing that we can work together, even in the realm of finances, you know, we're sending them a message that's an amazing message.
That was finance. It's amazing. I agree. I tell guys, love her, spend money on her. I'm not saying throw money, but if she wants to go back to school, let's say your wife gets a part-time job and needs help with the kids. You start helping with the kids. She's going to follow you off a cliff. She's so indebted. I'm like, I got the best husband ever. You're doing the dishes. You know, I'm serious. That is gold.
No,
that
it is.
Is a good spiritual man of God helping his wife maximize her. And the other way around, too. You know, I have clients here where the woman has the money, you know, because through a career and whatnot, it's the same. It doesn't, the dynamic doesn't change how it plays out. You know, that what would be the word? That's, you know, for each couple. But I got to tell you something, David. And 80% of my couples I see, that dynamic is in the room to a greater or lesser degree.
Wow.
I know, it's wild.
It is. It's crazy, man. You know what I'm super impressed with, Steve, is just all the work you've done with just this shame, right? And
thank you.
How it ties into every aspect of our lives, from our fathers to your mother to your marriage to.
Yep.
Oh, man, it's really deep seated, if you think about it.
It really is. It's insidious, David, meaning it's just, okay, cancer, I call it emotional cancer.
Okay.
And just as cancer rebels against the body, shame rebels against the soul.
Wow.
It's got to be removed.
Wow. And it takes exposure, right?
Yep.
Okay. Radiation
is exposing it. Emotional radiation is healing, forgiveness, developing your spiritual life. There's no way around it. Call it what you want, David. At the end of the day, you got the spirit inside of you. You got to connect with. That's going to clean off that gold brick. And I got this whole thing about money and power. Oof. I tell men, you want to have a great marriage, empower her. When she wants to start, okay, there's some eateries around here where the wife wanted to start something, the husband got behind it, and it took off like a rocket. And now the husband's helped manage her money. It's like,
right?
It's a blessing.
Wow.
You never lose, David, when you're generous.
And that's that golden rule you talk about, too, being generous.
You never lose. And shame isn't generous. Shame hoards. Some guy goes, how do you know I'm being driven by shame? Well, you're being generous. That's not shame. That's empowering. That's not shame. That's incredible.
Wow, man. Once again, I'm just so blown away by how shame has just so many avenues in people's lives that you could tie it to, you know?
Yeah, it really is. It's brutal. And, you know, as we, as psychologists, as pastors and spiritual mentors, if we can help people to see that can be exposed, let's go. A lot of good stuff happening.
Absolutely. And I think that would even, I mean, you know, once again, our topic was masculinity, correct? And toxic masculinity and defining that and the differences. I mean, just with shame alone, just the topic that you talked about, I think that would remove this stigma of toxic masculinity, you know? I had...
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I had a past guest on here, and his name's, you know, Mark Real, and he's a father's advocate out of Southern California. Great guy, you know. And he was talking about how toxic masculinity was started in the 60s, with the women's rights movements and stuff like that. And, he was going on saying how, and I don't want to misquote him, but from the way I understood it, it was this movement where women didn't, for lack of better words, they didn't feel empowered. So they figured out that, hey, I am woman, hear me roar. We need to feel empowered. Right. You're not listening to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
Is that you could tie that to shame?
Repression. Yeah, absolutely. Shame limits. I don't want to use shame like the only tool I have is a hammer, so everything's a nail. Mm-hmm. But when in doubt, addressing shame, you're not going to miss much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Man,
you won't miss much.
It's amazing. Just like I said, once again, just everything you've been doing, all the research, all the books you're putting out there, just bringing awareness to men to deal with these deep-seated issues that we all face. I mean, if you're being real with yourself, we have all these issues. I try to get real on this show as much as possible, just even with sharing, the story about my father, in that wrestling match. You know what I mean?
By the way, David, that's very powerful. That's a defining moment. Mm-hmm. And so you understand how much your dad's approval and acceptance meant to you. Mm-hmm. What a gift you can give to your son and other men.
Mm-hmm.
So I tell guys, if you're in the role of a father, you're a father. Don't worry about biology. If you're in the role of a father in a boy's or daughter's, young girl's life, you're a father. Step it up. Take care of business.
Mm-hmm.
And it will make a huge difference.
And I want to quote you because the last time you said something that it really caught my attention, and I thought it was amazing. And you said that at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you make more money than, Bill Gates or whatever.
Yep.
You know what I mean? We're all on a level playing field. We're all fathers here.
Bingo.
Right? And
yep.
I want what's best for your children, and you want what's best for my children.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And I thought that was just amazing because, sometimes we tend as men to identify with, certain aspects, you know what I mean? And I mean, that's a whole different podcast in itself, identifying with our jobs or careers or titles or whatever, But I think it was interesting that you said that, and I really appreciate that, and that sticks with me. It does.
Yeah, David, that's why all the stuff you're doing, I don't care if the guy's white collar, blue collar, or owns all the collars. Mm-hmm. We're all dads. We all put our pants on one leg at a time, and we're here to help each other. That's our goal.
Absolutely, Steve. What's a bit of advice that you can share with our audience right now about, just masculinity? What can you share with us real quick, if you don't mind, Steve?
Sure. That's a great question. I would recommend being masculine, self-acceptance, accept your blind spots, focus on the people in your life and what's important to them. And number 3, take responsibility for your actions. You do those 3, you're a stud. You're going to move mountains and change the people's world around you. Self-acceptance, focus on what they need, and take responsibility. That is an incredible dynamic.
I like that. I mean, that was beautifully said, brother. Once again, that's amazing. Once again, Steve, thank you for coming on this podcast again. I mean, I know we can go on and on and on and on. You know what I mean?
No, David, it's a pleasure. And I love and congratulations on the great work you're doing and the people you're working with. Fantastic.
Absolutely, Steve. Once again, can you share with our audience how they can get a hold of you? I know I have a Instagram deal for me on you, so.
Sure, StephanPoulter.com, STEPHAN, Poulter, POULTER.com, or look up The Shame Factor, my books on Amazon, or The Father Factor, The Mother Factor, The X Factor, any of those books. they can get a hold of me. I do telephone sessions and consultations. So I'm glad to talk to people around the country, dads and moms, whoever we need.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And then once again, you guys, if they call me, I'm going to go ahead and refer you to Steve as well. Just tell him the Show Up Dad sent you. Once again,
please.
Right? Now, once again, this podcast is made possible through donations from listeners like you and our partners at Line 11 Clothing Company, making apparel for our first responders that you can be proud of, and Monzingo Knives. Each knife is created with craftsmanship that only a tradesman could provide. And our partners here at KDAZ 96.9, that they listen to us. We have over 700,000 listeners in the metro area, and we are conservative radio. So once again, thank you, Steve, for coming on here and just talking to us and just being an amazing man.
God bless you, folks out there. We're all in this together. I think lastly, masculinity, don't isolate yourself. Reach out to the brotherhood.
Yes.
Reach out to the brotherhood. Guys at church, neighborhood, guys at work, just reach out. Don't isolate. When in doubt.
Man, words of wisdom. Once again, Steve, thank you so much for coming on here and
God bless you, brother. Being
a part of this. Thank you.
Thank you, David. I'll talk to you soon.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
God bless. Okay, bye-bye.